Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're happy to have you join us this evening on community meeting number 2 of the Welch Elementary School project. I'm Beverly Griffin Dunn, and I'm chair of the Welch School Building Committee. And I'm very happy to be the person who's going to introduce you to many members of our team who are going to explain this process as we go forward. The purpose of our community meetings is so that we can inform the public of what's going on with the Welch project. We're going to tell you where we've been, what we're doing, and where we're going with this. It's a really great project. There are a lot of moving parts. We want to keep everyone informed. And as we go through, you're going to hear from our owner's project manager, our design team. You'll hear from our superintendent, the principal, and we're going to make sure that you have a really good understanding of what's going on, and we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. First, I'm going to let the mayor take over here, and I'd like to welcome Mayor Ted Betancourt. He's going to give you some great information about this project.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. I appreciate that, and I'm glad everyone's able to join us this evening for really an important presentation. I'm so excited to be here, and I really feel that we've done an excellent job as a team moving this project forward. There's a great deal of work that goes into this project. You'll be seeing it shortly during the presentation. But to really do a strong project, you have to have a strong team. And I really wanted to thank so many people that have really helped us get to this point. First, I wanted to thank Mrs. Dunn, our chair, who's done a terrific job helping move this project along. We have an excellent team. Our owner's project manager, Doran Whittier, have been wonderful. Tedesco Design is our design team who's worked with us in the past on a number of projects, most notably the Higgins Middle School. And we have an excellent committee of administrators, teachers, tradespeople, so many people that are lending their expertise to the project. So I'm really excited about what this is going to mean for the Welch School and the Welch School community. This project is going to make a difference in the lives of so many students and teachers and so many people across that area. So very excited about it. I have a couple other things that I'll add as we get going, but really excited. Hold on. Sorry, I just got interrupted by my 3-year-old. He told me he has to go to the potty. So I told him that has to be put on hold for a second.
That's
I wasn't expecting that. So anyway, Mrs. Dunn, I'll turn it back over to you, and I'll have some other things to discuss once my mind gets right. So thank you, everyone.
Tell Brady thank you for bringing us all back to earth. We're designing an elementary school.
Yes.
for little kids like him. Okay, thank you. Next up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Josh Vidal. Dr. Vidal is going to speak just very briefly, and then later on in the presentation, he's going to have a lot more information for you. But Dr. Vidal, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Yes, hello to everyone. I just have to say, Mayor Betancourt said it all, but I'm extremely excited about the work that is being done. It's an incredibly collaborative team, and I continue to be impressed, and I think the community will also be impressed with what you'll hear tonight, and we're really excited. This is going to be a great thing for the Welch community and for the students, and we're just really excited to get this underway. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Vidal. Now, we're going to proceed through the agenda for the evening, and you're going to meet our owner's project manager, which is the Doran Whittier group. And Doran Whittier is represented tonight by Mike Burton and Christina Delangelo. We also have with us our architects. That is our design team, and it's Tedesco Design, as the mayor said. They've worked with us in the past on other projects. You're probably very familiar with them. The new Higgins, the Brown, the Carroll, and other projects in the city. So we're going to proceed now through the agenda, and you're going to hear first about the project milestones and schedule. And I'm not sure who was going to bring that forward, whether it was going to be Mike Burton first and then Donna Tedesco. All right, Mike, go right ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bev, and appreciate everybody's kind words. I also have all the kids at home who are all streaming devices, so I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that my Wi-Fi stays with me. Okay, our agenda for tonight, we're going to be reviewing our timeline. We're going to talk about educational program. We're going to recover some of the information that we touched on in the first community meeting and talk a little bit about the existing conditions, go through some of the preliminary considerations. We're going to talk about swing space and ultimately our final evaluation for alternatives. And as Bev said, we will have an opportunity at the end for public comment and feedback. So next slide. So of those topics, let's start with a schedule. We are going to talk a little bit about MSBA, just kind of remind folks who they are. They're our partner in this project, and we're going to hit some of the upcoming dates within the next few months and also talk a little bit about schedule as well. Next slide, please.
Mike was saying he was having some technical difficulties. You got it, Mike?
Yeah, sorry,
there you
go. Came back. I'm gonna have to take those iPads away from the kids. So just to remind folks, we covered this at the first community meeting. Just want to talk about the MSBA and sort of who they are, and they're a quasi-independent government authority, and they're created to reform the funding of capital improvements in the Commonwealth's public schools. They're going to be our partner in this process, and they do provide funding to the district. They do this through a pay-as-you-go reimbursement process that the city will go through, and currently they've agreed to provide 54% reimbursement of all eligible costs. Our agreed upon enrollment is currently 390 students, and they have a very clear and linear process that we're going to walk you through as well. Next slide. So as I said, the MSBA process consists of 8 modules. We're going to focus primarily on 3 and 4 tonight because that's where we are. I'll recap 1 and 2. The first module is the eligibility period, and this is when the district gets invited into the MSBA program. You do have to be invited, so it's nice to be in once you're in. And from there, we went into module 2, which is essentially pulling together the team, which is the OPM and the designer who are here tonight. This concluded in August this past summer, and currently we're in module 3, which is known as the feasibility phase, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in detail. Next slide, please. So module 3, this is called the Feasibility Study, and the time frame for this was, it began in September of 20, and this will run through April of 21. The MSBA, when you're in their program, they require you to explore many different options as solutions for your school, and these options include anywhere from a renovation to an addition renovation project and a new construction project. This is part of how the MSBA would like you to look at it. They want to make sure that all options are explored. Module 3 has 2 key deliverables, the first of which is called the Preliminary Design Program, which I'll probably refer to as PDP several times, and so I apologize for any acronyms, but the Preliminary Design Program, which we did discuss at the previous community meeting. This includes sort of the upfront data gathering information. The MSBA wants to understand the educational program for the school. They want documentation of the existing conditions of the current facility, and they want to understand, our design parameters upfront, and then ultimately they want to see all the different options that I spoke about, meaning repair, add reno, and new. So the PDP was submitted to the MSBA in December. And so now we've moved on to the next deliverable, which is the preferred schematic report. This is what we're working to complete right now. And this is a stage where we review the multiple options and work with the city to determine the most cost-effective and educationally appropriate solution for the Welch Elementary School. This submission ultimately summarizes the district's process and evaluation of all of the options. This provides cost information, and it identifies the district's conclusion for which option is preferred. There's a lot of PSR information that we're going to share with you tonight, and that will be the meat of our discussion. And we do plan to submit this to the MSBA towards the end of this month, and we're going to talk about dates here in a moment. Next slide, please. Module 4, this is schematic design, and this will kick off around the end of this month, and this will run through October of 2021. This is a very important phase where we get further into the detailed design of that one preferred option. During this phase, we're going to look a lot more closely at project cost with detailed estimates. We're also going to confirm our building approach, meaning how are we going to build it in terms of a construction manager and a general contractor, and I'll speak more about that shortly. We're going to look a lot greater into details around the schedule of the construction, because when you go CM at risk, which this school building committee has chosen to do, we're going to get a lot of feedback and information from the construction manager during schematic design. Also, we're going to be looking at phasing and logistics, which is a very important part of the construction piece. And this is also ultimately where we start getting preliminary plans and specifications from the designer. And as I mentioned at the last community meeting, the reason this phase is very critical is because at the end of schematic design, this is when we're going to make our deal with the MSBA, if you will. At the end of this phase, you enter into what is called the project scope and budget agreement. And at this phase of the job, this is when the city will lock in terms of schedule, cost, and ultimately the max grant amount that we will get from the MSBA. And so this is a very important phase, and we're looking forward to it. We will hold another community meeting to brief everybody about this process. And I think right now we're planning probably July, August-ish. So we'll probably see you again this summer. And the SD submission does require an MSBA board vote to proceed, and we anticipate that activity taking place in October of 2021. Next slide. Yep, Module 5. Module 5 is once we've got a project scope and budget agreement at the conclusion of schematic design, the city has 120 days to secure funding. And working with the mayor and our executive working group, we anticipate this activity to take place with city council towards the end of this year, meaning November or December of 2021. Once the funding, if and when the funding is approved, this concludes and we enter into a project funding agreement with the MSBA. And so there are several other modules that we can talk about, but we want to focus primarily on the information that we have now as it relates to the preferred schematic report. So with that, some milestone dates. Okay, so here we are. This is community meeting number 2 on the 8th. Next week, we're going to be meeting with our school building committee to vote to approve the preferred schematic report. From there, on February 24th, we will be submitting that to the MSBA. We will also be meeting with the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee. This is a subcommittee from the MSBA where they look to basically validate some of our design assumptions and parameters. And we have 2 placeholder dates right now that need to be confirmed, but we're targeting March 10th or March 24th. And then again, that concludes with the MSBA board vote on April 14th. Next slide, please. So on this schedule slide, this is a graphic representation of sort of the modules that I just walked you through. And the one thing we want to point out is that, you know, as it relates to construction, what we are showing here is that we would like to get construction going as soon as possible. And we do this because, you know, each year that you shift the job, you are subject to escalation costs. So the sooner you can start, the more cost effective we're going to be. And so right now we are targeting a construction start of summer of 22. We do wish to note that the construction start and overall duration are subject to change. This is very early in the process. And so right now, this is essentially a placeholder. And as I said, we will be utilizing the CM at risk delivery method. And this means that we'll have the construction manager on board, hopefully in a few months. And so next time when we come back to speak with you this summer, we're going to have a lot more detailed information on schedule, as well as ideas on phasing and logistics and so forth. So the other point I think that it's important to get out there is that we are working with a school building committee to identify times that are appropriate, during the design process to seek input from the multiple stakeholders that are associated with the school. And when I say stakeholder, that's a student, that's a teacher, that's a neighbor, that's anybody who has a stake in this game. And so we're looking to work with the SBC to find times that are appropriate to engage these people in discussions. And so we hope to be rolling some more of that information out to you as we continue. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Donna, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of the educational goals for the project.
Thank you, Mike. So first and foremost, as this is an educational facility and a really critical piece of the students' educational journey, it was important to set forth the educational program criteria in order to help inform the design. Next slide. So understanding what would be great as far as educational improvements to the facility as we look at options. Really, it was a combination of a lot of various areas that could be improved, but mostly to provide for flexibility within the existing building. You have sufficient space from classrooms, but it would be great to be able to provide additional flexibility within the classrooms themselves to accommodate some developing district-wide programs, such as a digital literacy program, which would be encompassed in an updated and enhanced media center or library. And then there are some areas within the school itself that are larger quarters that do not really benefit anyone. So we wanted to take advantage of some of those areas and incorporate those and transform those into educational spaces. Critical to the Welch community and any school, but specifically to the Welch community, is to support this social and emotional learning. Everyone could use some additional storage space. And then, of course, whether you consider it an educational improvement or building improvement, is to provide the necessary security for school facilities these days. Next slide. I'm going to turn this over to Vivian, who will just walk through the existing conditions as well as some of the options we've considered.
Great, thank you, Donna. As we shared with you at our last meeting, when was that, in December? Our design process started with a thorough existing condition study to understand the building and the site challenges and opportunities. Next slide, please. The Welch Elementary School and its grounds are an integral part of a rich and diverse neighborhood and serves as a rich resource, not only during the school day, but also when school is not in session. It also serves as an extension of the neighboring recreational space. And we know that connections to the surrounding neighborhood are important. And we would look at maintaining and enhancing those connections. Next. So as part of our existing condition study, we also looked at how the Welch Elementary School is accessed. The Welch's central location provides a great opportunity for children, neighborhood children, to walk to school. Here on this slide, you'll see the little blue dots. Those are the paths that children come to the school, whether it's during the school day or during the weekends. I've seen kids out there playing basketball. So we really, we want to enhance those connections. We also reviewed the existing circulation patterns on site by vehicles. Next, please. So this slide shows where the automobile and buses come in. Those are the red and yellow arrows. And the emergency vehicles right now have full access around the building, which is really great. That's what you want. You'll also see that there are several arrows around the building. Those are all access and exit points from the school. So we want to take a hard look at that and just make sure that what we design meets all the security measures that are required. Understanding how circulation works helps to inform how improvements to the building and the site are approached. Next. So what we learn from the site is that based on the existing conditions, improvements are required for accessibility as well as for maintenance purposes. We looked at the condition of the vehicular pavement and curbing. Some are in poor condition, some are in fair condition. We're going to be looking at how to improve that. We looked at the recreation areas. The play area in the back have tree wells that have in time kind of depressed. So we're going to look at improving that area to make it safe for kids to run around in. We also looked at the play structures as well as site lighting. And then we also looked at what the condition of existing plant material is. The site is bordered by wetlands and riverfront, and we want to maintain whatever we're doing on the site to make sure that what we do does not impact the wetlands and the waterfront or the riverfront. What we'll be proposing is to improve a lot of this existing conditions and also to improve the site lighting with the goal of providing a safe and accessible outdoor environment. Next. The existing building conditions were also evaluated as part of the PDP phase. Again, this is, as Mike referred to the PDP, the first part of the feasibility study. The school is organized well in that the grades are clustered together at each quadrant. So there's like 4 parts to the building. The layout is compact with easy access to the gym, which is shown in red, the library in bright yellow in the center, and cafeteria by all the students. They can access pretty easily. We did find, however, that all building systems will need to be replaced and improvements are required to meet accessibility requirements within the school. Next. Access to the second floor is by 3 sets of stairs. And an elevator, you can kind of make it out, is centrally located next to that center stair, but it currently does not operate effectively and will need to be replaced as part of this project. You'll also see that there's a good amount of roof area there, and that area in the center where the skylights are will likely be used to provide space for new equipment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Next. So this is a short list of the components within the building that were evaluated. Generally, the mechanical, plumbing, and electrical systems require replacement. They're really beyond their useful life. The existing structure is sound, but will require reinforcement at areas of work where we will be adding equipment. Hazardous materials have been identified and areas of code and accessibility non-compliance have been evaluated. Next. Based on the conclusions from the existing condition studies, we are refining the scope of work that will be included as part of the Welch Elementary School project. So again, all of the existing conditions and also the program, as Donna mentioned, is really what informs this project. Next. The site work will include, at a minimum, repairs, again, as I said, and repaving of the existing sidewalks, adding curb cuts and accessible ramps, reconfiguring part of the existing parking lot. These are all the areas that are in yellow on the screen. So part of the parking lot will be reconfigured to provide a new accessible parking spaces. We'll be repairing and providing new pavement at the play area. To the back side of the school. The area where the play structure is will have new rubberized surfacing, so that provides accessibility to that area by kids with disabilities. We'll also be looking to add, again, new site lighting, and again, looking at ways to enhance the safety and security on the site. Next. While most of the systems upgrades within the building are pretty straightforward, we've looked at several options for the mechanical system that provides heating and possibly cooling at the Welch. The existing system provides for heating only through what's called a unit ventilator that draws, these are these cabinets that sit at each window in each classroom and draws fresh air in through the window wall, and it heats and mixes with some of the ambient air and is heated through a heating coil from the cabinet and then blown out again. These units are old. Many are in need of replacing, or they'll need replacement parts, but parts are starting to become hard to come by. So they're also very noisy, which really contributes negatively to the learning environment. So we looked at replacing the system in kind, so we could replace them with new unit ventilators, adding air conditioning to that system. And also we looked at many other options for air conditioning, heating as a whole system. And these are just summarized on the slide. The systems were evaluated based on compliance with current codes, physical requirements, the first costs and operating costs, as well as how well they provide air filtration and energy efficiency. We want to do what's best for the school, and we want to be able to look to the systems with an eye for sustainability. So again, we're really looking at, we'll also be evaluating the project through a LEED scorecard and hope to be able to have a LEED certified building. Next. So from the evaluations, the VRF system was ultimately selected as the basis of design. VRF stands for Variable Refrigerant Flow, which describes very broadly how the system works. The system provides full air conditioning for the whole building and is electrically operated, so it does not require a gas line to be brought in. It's also cost efficient in that it has a lower installation rate cost than some of the other systems, and also has efficient operating costs. Also, the components, and you'll see in this little diagram, the components reside in the ceiling, and they're fairly quiet and is great for a learning environment. Next. So as Mike had mentioned earlier, the MSBA process requires evaluation of 4 standard options that we studied during the PDP phase. A repairs and code upgrades option, which is what we're calling option R, where there's very little or no space reconfiguration. A renovations option, which is R1 or R2 in this case, where there is some space reconfiguration for programming purposes. An addition renovation option, which is the AR1 and AR2 on the screen, which where meaningful program space is added to the existing building and where the existing building spaces are also reconfigured and renovated. And on this diagram, you'll see that the bright yellow is what constitutes the new space or the addition. And then finally, a new construction option. In our case, we looked at a couple of scenarios for each of these. Next. Working closely with members of the building committee and school district to narrow down the options, it was determined that neither an addition renovation project or a new building would be fiscally feasible. We want to note that the Welch Elementary School project, when first submitted to the MSBA, was to be a robust repairs project, but was moved to the core program by the MSBA. This allows us to build more into the project, such as renovations for programmatic needs. Whereas a repairs only would really just repair and replace building systems. So based on the initial goals and fiscal limitations, the final evaluation of alternatives would include a repairs and code upgrade option, which is the option R on the screen here, and RAC, and a renovations option, which is the R1 and the R1 plus. These are just 2 different approaches to the 2 basic options. Option R is just a basic swap out of the Univent system for HVAC, whereas the option R with AC has the AC option. R1 has selected improvements, and R1 Plus has a few more than the selected improvements, and we'll get into that. Next. All right, so R1 scope noted on this slide include all work to make the building fully accessible. This will include, and you'll see the summaries A, B, and C. This is what we're calling the base scope for the building. So the accessibility improvements will include adding a ramp in the cafeteria to the stage, a new elevator, hardware replacement for doors, just to name a few items. This option will also include replacement of all of the building window walls and associated work to the roof overhangs. We'll also be replacing exterior doors, and there will be selective repairs to the existing concrete masonry fin walls that come out from the window walls. Finally, all building systems will be replaced as part of this option. So included is a new sprinkler system and fire alarm system, new electrical system, including all new lighting, a new security system, technology upgrades, and limited interior painting. However, this option, again, only replaces the existing univentilator options with a new univentilator and does not include air conditioning. Next. A second option R, which we are calling R-AC, adds an air conditioning system to the base scope for option R. This will require additional structural work at the center of the school. You can see that on your screen as the area in purple. It's where the admin and nurses area, as well as the library is. The beige color on the screen on the plans illustrates where the building system work will occur, and you'll see that all of the school will be impacted. All improvements are planned to be done in a phased manner, where quadrants of the building will be sectioned off and separated with barriers to ensure safety and security for all students and staff. This building design actually accommodates the sectioning off really well, just in terms of the number of stairs that are located in this building and the quadrant orientation. We'd be looking at vacating 8 spaces at a time and have explored incorporating temporary modular classrooms to be located on the site to provide the ability to vacate spaces on a phased basis. We've also been working with Dr. Vidal on this and other strategies that would make doing the phased work well. And please know that the safety and security of the students and staff are first and foremost priority for us. Next. Option R1 and R1 Plus includes all of the option R code and accessibility upgrades, including also the envelope repairs and system repairs. In addition, the improvements noted on this slide are included. Items in bold are what's included in the R1 Plus, but not in the R1 scope. Hopefully that's clear. So the additional improvements for both R1 and R1 Plus include replacement of all the existing flooring material, renovations to all classrooms to add marker boards and tack boards, more efficient storage, new millwork, and classroom speech reinforcement system within all of the educational spaces. Most significantly is that both the R1 options include renovations and relocation of the admin and nurses suite and expansion of the library. You'll see this in the purple and at the center of the school. So with this option, it provides the opportunity to move the admin and the nurses suite to the front of the school and just be able to provide a better connection with visitors entering the school, and also frees up space in the center to allocate to the library to provide much needed program space. So what the R1 Plus option provides, again, that the R1 option does not provide, is replacing the balance of the door hardware. So in the base scope, we would be replacing all the hardware that currently is not accessible. In this case, we would replace all of the existing lever hardware that actually are accessible. But what this does is it ensures that keying all is the same and that visually all the hardware is really cohesive. This option, the R1 Plus option, also replaces the exterior corrugated panels that sit over the window area. And more importantly, the R1 Plus option replaces the kitchen floor and has some limited replacement of kitchen equipment. So similar to the repairs options, the work for the R1 options will be phased with full separation between occupied spaces and areas of work to maintain staff and safety, security, and safety throughout the whole, throughout all phases. Next. So just to summarize, while the repairs options provide an opportunity to extend the physical life of the Welch Elementary School with much needed improvements, options R1 and R1 Plus provide educational and operational benefits that will enhance teaching and learning for all at the school. These are some of the priorities that we touched on, that Donna touched on earlier, that will be met by options R1 and R1 Plus. We can enhance the building security. We'll be able to support district-wide and school-specific programs. And most importantly, we can enhance program spaces. As we hone in on the details and schedule for how building improvements can be completed and how the work impacts student and staff, Dr. Vidal is looking at options at how best to support this. Next. And I will turn it over to Dr. Vidal at this point.
Thanks, Vivian. Go ahead, Dr. Vidal.
Okay, thank you, Vivian. Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. So we are exploring alternative swing space options. One of the things that they had talked about originally when we began the project was that, as Vivian said, during an occupied site construction, we really want to take into account the students, and we want to make sure that the safety of the students is really important throughout the process. So the design that we have really looks to be able to accommodate, closing a wing of the school at a time, and that would make sure that we would be able to, have one wing closed off and keep the students in the other wing, and it really would have as limited disruption as possible for the learning environment. So one way to do that is to rent or lease modular classrooms and put those modular classrooms on an annex or on the side of the building. That is a little bit cost prohibitive because that leased space would not be reimbursable. So the estimate for those in some of these models that you see is approximately $1.9 million. And again, that would not be reimbursable through MSBA. If we were to find alternative swing space somewhere in the city or at another school, we would be able to take that $1.9 million and then invest it into the building project. And that money could then be reimbursable, which we'd be able to spend between $3 and $4 million in enhanced programs for the educational program. So we really does benefit the Welch in the long term to explore these other options. So since those modular classrooms are not reimbursable, finding that alternative swing space within the district will allow us to reinvest those funds. So one of the things that we're really considering is how to have the least amount of impact as possible on the Welch school families and what our swing space options would be. So next slide, please. So one option that we've looked at was to rent space in Centennial Park. Another option that we were considering is to potentially relocate within the district. So identify some classrooms at Peabody High School or possibly at the Higgins Middle School. And then the fourth option would be to relocate to classrooms in other area elementary schools. So there are pros and cons to each one of these. Obviously, renting space at Centennial Park is an additional cost, which would be similar to the modular classrooms. So we did eliminate that, and we thought that identifying a space within the district would be the most cost-effective and provide us with the most benefit to the students. So as we explore these options, we really want to meet with the Welch school families and see who is going to be impacted before we make a final decision. I will say that that going to a middle or a high school does have its benefits, but also some of the drawbacks would be that elementary students would not have access to an elementary library or some of the specialist classes and whatnot. So it does seem to, if we have the space, it does seem to benefit us to keep the students as close to their neighborhood elementary school as possible and relocate them to other area elementaries. But we do want to really meet with the Welch school families, identify exactly which students we'd be talking about, and make sure that we minimize that disruption to their learning environment as little as possible. And we want to make sure that we're involving the families as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of our next steps, the most important thing that we're going to do is meet with our Welch school families. And so within the next month, Principal Massa and I will schedule a meeting and we'll talk to the Welch school families about what the options are, which students will be impacted, and how we can minimize that disruption. In the spring, we'll really try to identify the potential relocation schools, if there's one or multiple schools that we would ask the students to attend. And then during the summer, we would have our final prioritize the final placements for which schools the students would attend, and make sure that they have at least one full year at the Welch school before the transition, to make sure that we really minimize that disruption as much as possible and give students an opportunity to have some closure at the Welch school. So then in August of 2022, a full year later, we would begin to implement the relocation plan. And I think that's all I have for now, and I'm sure that there will be additional questions for me at the end.
Thanks, Dr. Vidal. Next slide, please. We're going to talk to you a little bit about some of the pricing information that goes along with these. And as Vivian stated, these are the options that we have been focusing on primarily. And the purpose of this slide is to outline some of the high-level numbers. And so, as you'll see in the blue bar at the bottom is the total construction cost for each of these options. In addition to the actual construction cost, there's additional soft cost items for architect, OPM, and several other factors. And so that gets you to a total project budget, which is located in the green bar. And then in the orange, or whatever color it is on your screen, is what we anticipate the district share would look like, which means after the MSBA reimburses on their eligible items, how much would it actually cost the city? And so I will point out that in the two R code options, which are essentially repairs, as Vivian walked you through the scope, those do include modulars. That's the 1.9 million that Dr. Vidal just talked about that we had assumed. And that assumption was based on roughly 8 spaces for about 2 years is how we came up to that value. And so, you know, based on Dr. Vidal's proposed swing space plan, if we were able to not require modulars and essentially provide space for the students within the districts, we put that cost, the 1.9 million, into actual construction costs by adding scope, much needed scope to the project. And so I do want to point out the R code options do have modulars, the R1 options do not. So that is based on the assumption that we can find swing space within the district. And so really, by doing this, we're able to provide much more meaningful improvements towards the school. We're going to receive reimbursement on these costs, and we're going to provide a project that can be much more than just a simple repair, and it actually provides educational and functional improvements as well. And so to recap, all the way to the right is our R1 option, or R1 plus option, I'm sorry, which provides all the repairs that Vivian mentioned, substantial renovations, educational improvements, and air conditioning. Furthermore, the design team is exploring the possibility of achieving an additional 2% reimbursement from the MSBA. These would be from their green reimbursement points. And if we were able to do that, that's more reimbursement coming back to the project. And so in conclusion, if you look at this sheet and you compare the R1 plus to, say, the repair options, the R1 plus is actually going to cost you less, and you get much more bang for the buck, if you will, than just a repair option if we were able to utilize that swing space approach that we just talked about. And so this is a financial recap. These numbers are based off of our initial PDP estimates. And ultimately, at next week's SBC meeting, we will be looking for a vote from the SBC on the preferred option. So I would pause there and ask if Mrs. Dunn or Mayor would like to add anything at this point.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
You had muted
Yep,
yourself.
if I could just jump in for a moment.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike, Vivian, Donna, for a great presentation, a lot of information. And this certainly has had a great deal of variations that we've looked at to make sure that we do the very best project we can. And that certainly has been the driving factor from the very beginning. We wanted to do a project that all of our city, the Welch School community would be proud of. And it certainly over time, there were more needs that were recognized and the project took on a greater scope, which I think was important. And I think we're going to be doing a project that's going to set us up for many decades to come to have a very strong Welch School, which is certainly important. We're looking at new windows, which is something that from the very beginning we've needed. We've needed that for a number of years. But new mechanical systems, plumbing systems, electrical, communications, data systems. Air conditioning was important to this project to make that more of a year-round school. Accessibility upgrades, kitchen upgrades, site work. And it was really important to me, and I know many members of the board, to have this be a green project. And we're moving in that direction. And that 2% reimbursement will allow us to save hundreds of thousands of dollars to utilize in different ways. So I feel like we're on track. This is another important step for us to get to the project we want. Again, I want to thank the team for just some outstanding work. Mrs. Dunn, I did want to mention some elected officials that are on the committee. Mrs. Dunn is on the school committee, along with Jared Hockman. From the city council, we have Peter McGinn and Ryan Melville. They are on the school building committee and have been very helpful, as well as Josh Vidal and his team, superintendent's office, and Mrs. Massa and her teachers and some parents we have from the Welch School, which have been great. But this has certainly been an emphasis of us to try to make the improvements in our schools. I feel that a number of repair projects and upgrades were needed at a number of our schools, and the Welch has been identified as one of the schools in the very most need of repair and upgrades. As everybody knows, we did the brand new middle school a few years ago, and that is going exceptionally well, but some of our elementary schools really need work. The Welch School as well as the center. So certainly this project went up a little bit in terms of what we were originally forecasting, but we want to do this project correctly. We've sat down, budgeted, and looked at our financial outlook. This is a project that certainly we can tackle, but tackle now, as well as making sure that we're able to do some work at some of the other schools in the future. Most notably, the center school needs some major upgrades, and we're looking at the high school as well, the future of our high school, and as well as some other projects that we're looking at. So we're going to continue to work in the city on doing this important work. I think the investment in education is extremely important to have for a very successful city, and we need to make those investments now, and I think this is a good investment to make. There's a great deal of work that's going to have to take place in the months and years ahead, but I think we're going to be very proud of this project when it's all said and done. So I just wanted to thank everybody again for all their hard work getting us to this point, and certainly here also if there's any questions for me. So Mrs. Dunn, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, we've come to the point in our presentation where we could take some questions from members of the public. If anybody would like to call in with a question, we'll give you an answer if we're able at this time. So I believe that the link is at the bottom of your screen. And we'll keep an eye to see if anybody joins us.
I thought my son Brady might want to Zoom bomb us again.
He's going to keep us on our toes.
Yeah.
No, I don't see any questions from the public. And just so folks know, you can always reach out to any member of the committee, or definitely to me and the mayor and Dr. Vidal or Mrs. Massa. We'd be glad to answer your questions, because we know there are a lot of questions out there. It's a big project. Many people who have been members of the Welch community for many years, you're going to see a lot of the improvements that have been sought over the years. So this project, which really started out just to fix the univents, has now branched out to be able to include, things that we were looking for regarding security in the building, just being able to utilize the space a little bit better throughout the building. There are a lot of really good features of this project that have come out of the examination of not just the building, but the educational program. And of course, that's the most important piece of this. So we really want to thank Mrs. Masser and Dr. Vidala and the teachers at the Welch who have participated in this process. As we go forward, there are going to be many more areas where we're going to need people to help us as we move forward with this committee. There will be all kinds of volunteer opportunities. There's going to be all kinds of polling and opinion polls, and just checking in with people to see what you'd like and what you need to understand. So we hope you enjoyed this presentation, and we look forward to our next community meeting. I think we can wrap up tonight because, again, I don't see any questions or any calls, but reach out at any time, everybody. Thank you very much. And thank you to PAT and our IT department for helping to make this broadcast possible.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.